didn't want to come home like this. One of the most fondest memories of my childhood was when two of my brother's fathers, my father's brothers rather, who lived in Washington, D.C., would come home almost every summer. Uncle Dennis and Uncle Jerry. It would be a stir all over the little small town of Pittsburgh because Jerry and Dennis were home. And it was a good time for all of us. They always had wonderful stories to tell. They would tell things about the old days Daddy wouldn't tell. And very lively conversation. And even because Daddy wanted to look good in front of his brothers, you could hit him up for a little money when they were around. So we would plan that thing when he would be talking with Daddy, can I have a dime? Well, back then you get a candy bar for a dime. Can I have a dime? And he'd be like, yeah, they got me, but he'd come off that money. You know, and Uncle Dennis and Uncle Jerry, successful men who had done well in their life, and they were not braggadocious, but they were humble, but they were the type of men that any man would strive to want to emulate. That example stayed in my mind because when I went off to college and got a job, there were times when after being talked to any kind of way, I didn't go to school to be cussed out, especially by some folk that I got some issues I got to pray for. But you know what? I wanted to deal with it. But the thing that kept me from just saying, you know what, I'll get another job sometime and handle that thing was I didn't want to come back home to North Carolina, to my mother and father's home, unemployed. Because I whooped, and I would have whooped him. The boss man, the managers. So I held my peace. It was hard, but it kept going over and over in my mind. I was not going to come home having lost a job because I couldn't keep my temper. It's tough when you have to come home and people expect you to come in one way. You're left with high potential, but now you are faced with the task of coming home faced with disappointment, the word failure resounding in your ear. I'm going back home to Bethlehem. Or Apostle kisses her. Many times in the story she's made a villain. She's not a villain. She just simply listened to what her mother-in-law said. Ruth looks at her and said, no, I'm going with you. So they make their way back to Bethlehem. Walk in the city, and you know, when you've been going through something, you feel like everybody talking about you. When trouble comes at home, you feel like everybody knows it. And let me pull up a parenthesis right here, just as a matter of practical teaching. If you got trouble at home, don't put it on Facebook. Everybody might not know it. Going back to the text. Naomi, sweetness, comes home and she feels like everybody looking at her. And they say, is this Naomi? Town is gathered together. And Naomi says, don't call me Naomi. That means sweetness. Don't call me that. Call me Mary, which means bitter. I'm bitter now. I'm bitter and I blame God. I'm bitter because she says, the Almighty has made me bitter. God did this to me. She's angry. She's bitter because she feels like that God dealt her an unfair hand. She says, call me Mary, call me bitter because I left full, but I came home empty. Call me bitter. I'm bitter now because now I have nothing. As a matter of fact, she says, I'm so bitter, I feel like God is against me. Not only that God, that's worse than just saying God left me. That's bad enough. But to say God is against me, meaning he's using his power, his almighty, omnipotent power to make my life hell. He said, not only the Lord against me, the Almighty, which means all-powerful one, El Shaddai. The Almighty has afflicted me. Says, God has done this to me. And no longer call me sweetness. As a matter of fact, call me the opposite of sweetness. I'm bitter. I didn't want to come home like this. I didn't want to come home empty and bitter and feeling like God is against me. But somebody here today can relate and say there are times in my life when I had to feel like, may not have been true, but in my spirit I felt like that somehow or another God has turned his back on me. Oh, I know we put on our nice Sunday faces, but the truth of the matter is sometimes it can feel like that God has just hung up the phone, put it on do not disturb, and did not even answer our call. And we go to church and we heard people say, call him in the morning, call him late at night, call him in the midnight hour. And I said, I've been calling him, but he won't answer my call. And then the devil picks up the phone instead of God and say, where is your God now? The devil picks up the phone and says, why were you tithing all that time? Why were you shouting and praising God all of that time? The devil can change your spirit. And if you're not careful, you will have a bitter spirit. You got to watch out for a bitter spirit. You got to be careful not to get a bitter spirit. Ephesians talks about bitterness. It says get rid of all bitterness, anger and rage, brawling and slander, putting everybody down and having malice in your heart. But be kind and compassionate, forgiving one another as God has forgiven you. You got to learn to show love. A bitter spirit will blind you to all the things God has in store. But I want you to know something. One thing I do admire Naomi for, and that is she did come home. I said she did come home. She may not want to come home like that, but she did come home. There's some blessings in coming home. There's some blessings when you finally lay aside pride and say, I don't care what I look like. I'm still coming home. The prodigal son will tell you, I was in the pig pen, mud between my toes, wanting to eat the pig food all by myself. But then I thought about it, and I said, in my Father's house, there's more than enough bread to spare. I want to tell somebody, get out of the pig pen, and you might have mud between your toes, but come on back home, because the Father is looking for you. He's waiting to welcome you back home.